Hi, and welcome to the OT is In, the podcast where we merge the worlds of education and occupational therapy to empower families like yours. I'm Sarah Collins, your host, an occupational therapist and a homeschooling parent. I've experienced occupational therapy by supporting families for over 15 years, but also through seeking out support of my own children, so I'm right here in the trenches with you. Though there is not one way to educate your child, there is a lot to consider when individualizing an education. And the goal of this podcast is to explain some of the why behind what an occupational therapist is thinking so you can apply it to your own family. Especially with my three favorite topics: executive functioning, handwriting, and sensory processing. Each episode will be packed with practical tips, expert interviews, and real-life stories aimed at helping you to create a supportive learning environment for your child. So, grab your headphones and get ready to dive in of the collision of education and occupational therapy. I'm Sarah Collins from Homeschool OT, and I'm thrilled to have you with me on this journey of discovery. If you've ever wondered whether reading aloud to your kids really matters once they're past the early years, or found yourself worrying that reading together is becoming stressful or too focused on performance and skill, this episode is for you. Today, we're exploring how read-alouds shift as children grow and why this tradition remains deeply relevant for families at every stage. You'll hear honest observations on how shared storytime builds not just vocabulary, but emotional connection, family culture, and a sense of roots, regardless of how well your child reads or how old they are. We'll also talk about reframing the act of reading aloud from a lesson or requirement to a relationship-driven practice. You'll get practical ideas for bringing joy and flexibility back into your family's routine, plus insights for supporting both enthusiastic and reluctant readers without losing the warmth and togetherness that makes homeschooling and reading aloud truly unique. This matters because when we focus only on reading outcomes, we miss out on the real possibility, connection, shared language, and belonging. By the end of this episode, you'll rethink what reading aloud can look like in your home and why it absolutely still counts. Before we get started, I have two things. One, thank you to our title sponsor, Lovevery. You'll hear more about them later in the episode, but it's important to note that without them, there would be no OT is In. And two, be sure to download the Why Reading is Hard and What to Do About It. It's linked in the show notes for you. Let's get started. I'm excited to share another resource for the homeschool community. This is an amazing success story from our sponsor, Learning RX Brain Training Centers. Here's what Lynn from Glendale, Arizona said about her daughter's experience at Learning RX. My child is truly thriving. It has been one of the best decisions we've made for her education and confidence. The changes we've seen are undeniable. The testing showed significant, measurable improvement across every single area. As a parent, watching her transform has been priceless. I was especially concerned because I struggled in school myself and recognized some of the same early signs in her. That's why we chose to act early, and I'm so grateful we did. The program requires both time and financial commitment, and I understand how intimidating that can feel, but the results speak for themselves. It was absolutely worth it. My daughter now proudly tells people, "It made my brain feel a lot stronger," and honestly, that's exactly what we've seen. You guys, Learning RX targets the root cause of learning struggles, cognitive skills that need to be strengthened. Every client is different and your child may or may not achieve the same results as Lynn's daughter, but connect with Learning RX to see if brain training would be a helpful next step for you and your child. Around the world in their centers and remotely over Zoom, they've worked with more than 130,000 children and adults who struggled with thinking and with learning. So visit learningrx.com/homeschoolot to get special discounted pricing on the cognitive skills assessment and sign up to get additional information and free resources from the Learning RX homeschool support team. Hey, and welcome back to the OT is in. Today I have with me Amber Johnston, who, we have run across each other several times at different homeschool conferences and things. And every time I fangirl a little because, and I just showed Amber right before, I'm going to show here for those of you watching on YouTube, the amount of things that I have in my commonplace journal, pages and pages and pages, all from Amber's work. So I'm super excited to share her with you guys today. So before we get started, really, Amber, can you kind of say, who you are and where you're from for those that don't know?
Sure, I'm Amber O'Neill Johnston, also known as Heritage Mom, and I live outside of Atlanta, Georgia, with my husband Scott and our four children. The two oldest ones are teens, they're 16 and 14-year-old girls, and then we have a 12 and 10-year-old boy.
That we're kind of right in the same. I mean, my oldest is 17, she's graduating this year, and then my youngest is 10. So we're right in the same. It's so interesting to think now. I mean, when you started this Heritage Mom blog, how old were your kids then?
So I think that my oldest was maybe six,
Okay.
say 6 or 7, perhaps.
Okay. And so your time has evolved and what stage of life that you're in has really changed, but yet it kind of keeps growing and changing. Do you feel like that there is a difference in, well, one, in kind of your thoughts and what you post about, what you write about, what you think about as your kids have aged? Or do you think it's just really the same kind of flow and what your homeschool looks like has changed?
Oh, yeah, I think that as my kids have gotten older, it's funny because in some ways I've relaxed on some of the things that I used to like to talk about or that I thought were so important. Now that I have a bit more perspective, I'm like, that I was really focused on this small thing, but actually I think this is the bigger thing over here now.
Yeah.
And I also find myself wanting to share more experiences with my older children with other people because I didn't really have that in front
Yeah.
of me before. So I realized that a large portion of my time has been spent among peers, which has been fabulous.
Yeah.
But it's the time with people who are a little bit ahead of me that, I missed out on quite a bit. So I think in some ways, but at the end of the day, I'm still talking about home
Yeah.
and family and kids and life and in some ways it hasn't changed all that much.
I think you are so right in that, you spend so much time with people who are in the same kind of stage of life as you. And then now, even as my daughter is going, off to college next year, and I'm thinking like, I need to know someone who's done this before, who I can talk to and who I can like make sure that I do this well. Like we need that mentorship. And so I love that you're starting to provide, or not even starting, but you have been, providing that for so many people and then looking for it for people ahead of you as well. Have you found it for people, you personally found people ahead of you that you can, learn from at this point?
I think online, but not as much in person. It's funny, there's this little vacuum because I have people who are way ahead of me,
Yeah.
right? Women in my real life who that I look to as mentors and people I look up to, but their kids are now in their 30s and beyond. And so they've done it and in that way they can speak into my life, but everything's changing rapidly.
Mm.
So, kind of the things that they said, for instance, for their children, getting into the colleges that they were interested in, I'm like, that's all outdated
Yeah.
now.
Right.
None of those things are relevant anymore. So, there's definitely a vacuum where I'm missing some leadership and kind of making it up as I go along. And, I guess that's part of, you can have all the advice in the world, but each mother has her own path that she has to discover with her children, no matter what.
Yes. Yes. And that is even, within homeschool spaces for sure. Like we talk all the time about, there are not two homeschools that are alike, which is a beautiful thing, but can also really be a hardship because there's no one who truly understands exactly, what you're going through and what you're doing at a certain time and place. So, ooh, I love that. Now, we're kind of straying off from what, you and I said that we were going to talk about, but I think that this is definitely something that most moms can relate to of that yeah, where do we find that camaraderie and also that mentorship? And guys, if you're listening and you're ready to give me a mentor, I'm in. Like I need that too. So let's hop into kind of our topic, which is where we really want to think about reading aloud to our kids, which even especially for me as they've gotten older has been still a piece of our life. Now, you talk a lot in A Place to Belong about the ideas of roots, right? And so reading aloud can help to provide that to our kids, like knowing where we're coming from and who we belong to. So, how did that start within your own family and like help your family to build those roots?
I think that it started in a couple of ways with my just immediate family. This idea of reading aloud gave us something to kind of root our days, even. And it's like something to say, the Johnstons do this. Like, this is what we do. We get up, we eat breakfast, we read aloud and we carry on with these different activities or, kind of like a rhythm to life.
Mhm.
So, in the easiest sense, it was something that I could count on, something easy, right?
Yeah.
In those early days of motherhood when I had a bunch of little ones underfoot, like I know if nothing else goes right, I can gather them around and read a story. And then in the broader sense, I think that it gave us a sense of roots because we were able to learn about the people that we come from and the places that they come from through books and story. So I didn't have all the answers to every question when, my kids are asking me, well, where are we from? Or in my kids' situations, they were starting to ask, why are we different? We look different than other people, or we are different than other people. Where did we come from? Where did our people come from? And books were able to answer a lot of those stories. And I think rather than like, here, go off and figure that out on your own, it was this situation of like, hey, let's come together and learn about that. And hearing it told through story was just really formative for all of us,
Yeah.
not just my kids. And I think that that was a big part of it as well for me.
Yeah, I love that our kids can see us learning and processing information through the same stories that they are. It's almost like it gives us even more of a tie to them because you have some of the same knowledge that you're getting from your stories and books. Now, how has the like route as far as the anchor to your day, how has that changed as your kids have gotten older?
So I definitely, when I didn't have any readers, I was reading everything aloud, right? So my whole day was spent reading aloud. It's funny when I was working on the audiobook for A Place to Belong, it took, several days to record everything in the studio. And on the last day, they were like, you don't have to come back tomorrow. I was like, oh, I'm scheduled for tomorrow. She's like, yeah, we scheduled you for an extra day because you're an amateur, you're not a professional narrator. I was like, ho, ho, ho.
Hey,
But little did you know
I know. So no one's been
that I
paying me, but I have been doing
exactly,
this.
exactly. So I was like, you underestimated me. I was like, but
Yeah.
I've been reading aloud for the most important audience for many,
Mm,
many years. And so that's how our days were. I was reading everything. And as children were able to read on their own, I handed some of that off, but I never handed it all. So actually, the last thing I did right before jumping on with you today was I'm reading a novel with my kids. And that's all, including the teens. And that's just the one thing that I've held on to.
yeah.
My big kids, I can't say that they sit there and do the full morning time with us anymore. They have classes they get into and all that, but we do all read together out loud. And it is one of the sweetest aspects of family life. And I'm just so grateful for that vision at a young age.
Yeah. Oh, I think that's so important. And also to recognize, like what it looks like, what you were saying here, like your teens are, what it looks like might be a little bit different, like what they're doing while you're reading and that type of thing, but it still can hold that bond in that time. My son this year is he's no longer homeschooled. He's going to the Philadelphia Hockey Academy every day, which gives us 35 minutes in the car back and forth twice a day. And so we're listening to books now, audiobooks as we go. And it still has been just this time of us, you know, having this common language. And in fact, the last one we just listened to was Catcher in the Rye, which, number one, I must have cheated in high school. I'm just throwing it out there because I do not remember it whatsoever. But I knew the title and I was not prepared for the language through the whole thing. The first day,
Yeah.
they cursed it throughout that whole thing. The first day, my son was like, "Mom, what are we doing?" Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
But now, as we just finished it, and he yesterday, in his very 14-year-old language, was like, "Mom, I low-key miss Holden Caulfield." I
Ah!
know, but
Yeah.
it looks very different, but we have related and laughed about it this whole time, and it's just really so appreciate. I'm so appreciative to that, which actually kind of brings me to, one of the strongest themes in your book is like shared languages and shared phrases and family references that, can come together through reading aloud. Like, how do you think, or how does reading aloud, how can it help build vocabulary that can give us this like memory and sense of belonging and not just definitions, but really relate your family together?
Right. I think that it basically has helped us to all kind of hear some of the same things at the same time. And wherever words are associated with emotion in a book, whether it's through laughter or, a touching moment or a very pivotal point in action, we tend to individually remember those words. But when you're reading aloud, there's a moment where you may have stopped, like, what? Or, the kids like to see me fumble words, and,
Mm.
and I'm like, listen, I'm not perfect. And sometimes I try to just go with it, but sometimes I'm like, I have no idea what
What
this
this
word
is.
says,
Yeah.
and we'll have to like look it up or else I'll just make up my own silly pronunciation and then the whole family starts using that pronunciation.
I
So
love
I
it.
mean, we really have fun with it. I think that there are times where we even finished a book. I love to tell this story that I was reading a book out loud to my kids. And when I finished, my youngest daughter, she was a lot younger at the time, she started crying. And the
Oh,
book had been really heavy, like kind of had an emotional aspect. So I felt horrible. I was like, oh my gosh, it was too much for her. I
yeah.
was really reading to her older sister. I just let her be in the room. And I was like, oh, and I was like, honey, why are you crying? And she was like, because it's over.
Oh,
So
she's like,
she
I'm
was
gonna miss
loving it.
it. Yeah.
Yes, I was just like the tears. I'm like drama queen. But, it was just this idea that we were doing a thing together
Yeah.
and, she didn't want the thing to end. And I think that that is, part of what stories can do. And sometimes, I don't want to make it seem like everything we read is just like so deep and pivotal. Sometimes it's just a lighthearted, fun story, and we're
Yeah.
just having a good time. The way a family might watch a movie together, or you
Right.
might run through the park. We're just, just chilling and spending time together, enjoying each other. So I think books can span all of that. And the words that are used within the book, the things that stick out in your mind, they become part of your family lexicon, and that connects people. It helps them to feel closer. And I think inside jokes are part of what can tie a family together in a special way as well.
That. And this also kind of brought two thoughts to my mind. First, being just in OT speak, gestalt language processing. So that's another way of processing language, not learning like, all these nouns first, like a ball and whatever, but instead, gestalt language processors tend to think in full phrases. And most of the time, they learn those because they are heavily based in emotion. And so just thinking about how these phrases can really build our kids' vernacular, even to the point of if you process language differently, when you're hearing in full story and hearing emotion tied to it, how this can really develop our kids' language no matter how they process it. So that is a beautiful part that I haven't really put together until right now. And the second thing that you brought up that I was like, yes, was how you struggle over words sometimes and everyone laughs about it. There are so many times when I'm talking to families and their kids are struggling readers and they get so frustrated and, put books away and whatever. And a lot of that comes from they don't realize that learning is to read is hard. And it's hard for so many people because they only hear us reading and it's like, do, 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 here we go, so easy. But if we can model like making a mistake and then just laughing about it, or just moving
Yeah.
on, how that can really affect our kids as they are learning to read.
And I've also explained to my children that I have a reader's vocabulary. And so, which is why I can write a lot of things that I can't even necessarily pronounce. So I know what those words mean and can understand them when I'm reading to myself, but I struggle sometimes with pronouncing
Mm-hmm.
difficult words that I've actually never heard said aloud, or that I can't remember. I haven't heard it said aloud enough times. And so I'm telling them that's a difference between a childhood spent only reading to yourself quietly versus a childhood
Right.
where there is some reading aloud, and some modeling of pronunciation. So, and I told them it's like, it's nothing to be ashamed of. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like, oh, I'm sorry, I read a lot, but I didn't have anyone to talk to about the
Yeah.
things I was reading. And so that has stayed with me even as an adult, this idea of this reader's vocabulary. So it can happen. And that's just another benefit of, I think, reading aloud.
That's the fascinating part. We're going to pause for a second to thank our sponsor, Love Every. As an occupational therapist, I'm often asked when children are truly ready to learn to read. From an OT perspective, readiness is about both acceptance and expectance, two themes we discuss frequently here on the OT is In. Accepting where your child's skills are today, while expecting that growth will come with the right supports in place. The Love Every reading skill set is designed to honor that balance. Through hands-on, developmentally aligned activities, children build foundational skills that support reading readiness, including phonological awareness, visual tracking, oral language, and early writing foundations. Skills are introduced gradually and intentionally, without rushing children before they're ready. And families are supported with a clear progression while children are given the time and space that they need to grow. Learn more about the Love Every reading skill set at loveevery.com. Now, back to the show. Welcome back. So, we've just started to mention, kiddos who are struggling readers. And I'm sure that there's some parents out there right now who are like, ooh, like I haven't done this, or I haven't done reading aloud, or I've made reading to be so kind of performance based of like my kid needs to read, and we've focused so much on that. So, for this mom or dad or parent, if their reading aloud has become a stressful or performance based time in their day, what would you say, and how can we help them to reclaim reading as a relationship?
You know, I'm always a big fan of just calling something different. So maybe it's just story time,
Yeah, yeah.
And I know story time has a connotation with little kids. We think of little ones at the library for story time, but I'm like, I like story time. I'm a
Right.
grown up, but or just time for us to gather, our gathering time. And so kind of disassociating it with this idea of a reading lesson where you're learning to read, and talk about the, value of hearing a story. There's so much value in that. And
Mhm.
we just talked about even in understanding pronunciations when you can hear things out loud, but also the way that we take story in. And we were made for oral storytelling as a people group, as humans, over the time span of history. There have always been oral stories, and we have folk songs, which are stories told to music, and all kinds of other areas that we're used to hearing. So I think that separating it from this idea of like a reading lesson, a skill-based thing, and instead putting it in the form, or the bucket wherever your family kind of puts entertainment or time spent together, chatting over dinner, or time spent together in these other ways. I also think that I think sometimes we get so serious as parents, and it is, these things are important, that we forget about having fun. So I know Pages and Popcorn is something my kids really love, where we're reading a book with the sole purpose of watching the movie. Like
Yeah.
at the end, there's going to be a payout, and we're going to all snuggle on the couch. We're going to watch a movie, order pizza, pop popcorn. And I think that remembering to bring a smile to whatever it is you're doing, just kind of let some of that tension out for both you and the children, is something important to remember.
Yeah. Oh, that's so, I think Pages of Popcorn. That's like the best idea. My
Yeah.
son and I are going to hop in on that one. Now, let's think about the flip side. So, parents who at this point have only been able to read aloud because their kiddos are really aversive or don't feel confident enough to start to kind of learn to read on their own. How can we talk through that with parents? Like, is that enough? Is what they're doing enough?
Mhm. I think it depends on the child, you know. So if each mother knows her own child so well, if it's just encouragement, if there's fear or apprehension, but the ability is there, then some partner reading,
Mm,
like, just a little, hey, you read aloud to me a little bit. I want to get to be the
yeah.
one laying on the couch with my feet in your lap while you read to me, and just go back and forth with them, encourage them. You do, maybe they just do one of the voices if it's a book that has different characters, and it's like, you be the little troll, and they only say those parts and things, whatever you can do to help build confidence. And in some situations, maybe there really is a struggle with reading, and you definitely want to get those supports and be helping them with that. But I still feel like that can be separated from this idea of reading aloud. I don't think you could ever kind of read aloud too much
Right.
unless you're not allowing the child to grow. And that can happen, especially with homeschool moms. We don't ever want to miss out on the story. We don't want them to read without us because for so long we were a part of everything. And now they can read on their own, and we're sometimes handicapping them in terms of saying, you can't, don't, I don't want you to read this aloud because then you'll be enjoying this story, or you'll know something, or you'll read something that I don't. And if someone's never experienced that, they probably think this sounds so silly, but
No,
it happens.
yeah, I very much agree with that. And it's like you putting that to words, because there is a lot of that, like as my kids have gotten older and I can't keep up and read everything that they're going to read. But I do feel like sometimes they're having a conversation with a peer, or they're even just knowing something on their own that I don't know or I wasn't a part of. You can feel a little left out, right? Mm.
After being so involved for so long,
Yeah, and being like,
that
I'm the center of your world, right? And then
yes.
now I'm no longer the center of your world. Like,
It's
eesh.
like, funny, you're growing up. I didn't know that was going to happen.
I know, especially like when you're in the trenches when they're so little, and it seems like it's a day-to-day like slog sometimes, almost like it can be a joyful slog, but it's still a slog. And then, as they're getting older and older and older, and you can miss some of that little kid stuff, or this reading aloud, like just when I was the center of your world, and now that it's not anymore, it's tough. Speaking as a mom
Yeah, and
who's
I
about
think
to
also
have our kiddo go.
you have to expand what you're willing to read aloud as well.
Mm,
There was a point where we're choosing all the books, and of course, we're choosing the finest books, and we've read reviews, and we're like, and then, our kid comes around and it's like, hey, I want you to read this aloud. And they bring it over to you. You're like, oh, joy, joy. Yeah. And so, I think that we went from, the world's most beautiful classics, and then we went into this long fantasy, adventure driven, or whatever. And we've meandered. And now my older girls, sometimes they're bringing me stuff. I'm like, that's a romance book. And they're like, I know. I'm like,
You're
well, I
like,
was a
this
little
could
boy. Yeah. I was like,
get.
about that, girls. So, I've had to shift and change and kind of meander through this alongside my kids as they've grown.
Yeah. Have you ever stopped reading a book like mid book if it's just not fitting or not working, or you are pushed through her?
I am a 95% push througher because typically once I've started reading a book, I really feel like I have a good, good word that we are going to like this
Yeah.
book. But I have stopped reading a book
Yeah.
before, a couple, more than one, a couple. And one, I stopped reading because it was so incredibly difficult to read aloud that it wasn't even enjoyable. It wasn't enjoyable for me. It wasn't enjoyable for them. It was repetitive. None of us were liking it. And we read like 75% of it. I was like, abandoned ship, and everybody
Yeah.
cheered. And then there was another book that I stopped reading because my kids begged me to. They're just like, this
Really?
is terrible. We don't like it. It's
Yeah.
boring. Like, and I was really bummed about that, but it's not that big of a deal.
Yeah.
Those are the times when I have to talk to myself like, Amber, dude, take a chill pill. It's going to
Yeah.
be okay. If you stop reading this and start another book, it's okay. So I will do it, but I don't make a habit out of it.
I would say the same thing in our family, because I think I forever am talking to my kids about persistence all the time. Like, we're going to persist through things, and how, colleges do hard things. Like, we talk about this all the time. And then here we are in a book that none of us are enjoying. And I'm like, Sarah, you need to back talk. You need to say, like, it's okay. We don't have to persist through everything. Sometimes this is not the thing to persist through.
Yes.
Oh, I am so grateful for, having this conversation with you. And I know it's going to be so just encouraging for so many other people to listen to. Can you tell everyone where they can find you and your books? Because I know I have read A Place to Belong. Clearly, I've talked about that one quite a bit, but you have several others as well. So can you tell us about all that?
Yes, you can find me online at heritagemom.com and at Heritage Mom Blog on socials. And my books, A Place to Belong, Soul School, and Homegrown, are all available wherever books are sold, but there's plenty of information about them on the website, heritagemom.com as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here. And hopefully we'll come up, cross paths again at other homeschool conferences. Where are you going to be this year?
Oh my goodness, I don't even know. I know I'm going to be in Maryland and North Carolina. I don't know, all over. I could pop up anywhere.
Awesome. Well, I'm sure people will love to see you. So thank you again so much and for your time.
Thank you.
As we wrap up today's episode, I want to leave you with a thought. Understanding why reading aloud matters, why it builds roots, connection, and shared language in our families is powerful. But as anyone who's homeschooled knows, understanding the value isn't always enough to make it happen in the midst of real life. Implementation is where most families get stuck, and that's completely normal. Every homeschool journey is different, and how you bring meaningful reading into your days depends on your kids' ages, their learning challenges, your routines, and the natural ebb and flow of family life. This is exactly where coaching from the Homeschool OT comes in. When you join me for coaching, it's interactive, conversational, and it's flexible. We problem solve in real time so you can bring those actual moments from a stressful story time, a struggling reader, or a routine that just isn't working, and we'll work through them together. Coaching is for families who want ongoing support as new challenges pop up, need help with sensory needs, learning struggles, or behavior, or simply aren't sure what to tweak when something feels off. It's also helpful if you want regular check-ins or accountability to keep moving forward. You can choose monthly coaching, save bulk sessions for the moments you need them most, or join group coaching with friends or your co-op. It's all about supporting you as you build a homeschool life that works for your real family, not just in theory. If you're listening today and feel ready for practical help turning these ideas into your own routines, I invite you to explore coaching support. You can do this at homeschoolot.com. Remember, you are not alone. The OT is always in. Thanks for being here.